This episode is brought to you by Care.com. Spring is here, which can mean a fresh start, but if you're caring for an aging parent, it can feel like there's no reset. So many of my friends are juggling this right now, how to support their aging parents and manage their young families. It can feel like it's all just too much. Care.com makes hiring the right care, from in-home caregivers to local senior communities, feel more manageable. Care.com has safety and hiring tools so you can search for exactly what your aging loved one needs, from meal prep, companionship, to in-home support for loved ones with dementia. You can read real reviews and message background-checked in-home caregivers without sharing any information up front. You can explore local senior communities, book a tour, or sign up for the Senior Care Advisor Plan, which comes with 90 days of support from a master's level social worker to help build a personalized care plan for you. I'm partnering with Care.com because it really is an easier way to find help. For a limited time, visit Care.com and use code BEHAVIOR for 20% off your initial subscription or Senior Care Advisor Plan. That's behavior, all one word. Visit Care.com today. When it's not you, it's Care.com. Welcome back to the Behavior Blueprint. Today we're talking about something that can absolutely take over your house, and that is sibling conflict. And I mean the kind that starts before you've had coffee, the kind where one kid is breathing too loudly and the other one looked at them the wrong way. Somebody took a toy they didn't care about until 3 seconds ago, and suddenly you're standing in your kitchen playing hostage negotiator before 7:15 in the morning. If you've ever thought, why are they always fighting? Why does my kid seem to poke and poke and poke her until she finally explodes? Or honestly, am I supposed to handle this without being a referee for the rest of my life? This episode is for you.
Hi, I'm Mandy, the family behaviorist, and these are 3 of my favorite little humans.
Hi, I'm on this podcast. Let's do this.
Let's do this. This is the Behavior Blueprint, where we can figure out why kids do what they do.
Is that why parents yell sometimes?
Sometimes, because parenthood is messy, behavior is complex, but with the right blueprint, we can figure it out together.
Yeah!
Because here's the truth, sibling conflict is incredibly common, but it doesn't make it any easier. You can be exhausting, all-consuming. It can make you feel like you're failing even when you're not. So today, I want to walk you through what is actually driving sibling conflict, why it keeps happening, what parents accidentally do that keeps it going, and more importantly, what to do instead. Because the goal is not to raise kids who never fight. That's not realistic. The goal is to raise kids who can learn how to handle conflict better. All right, let's get into it. As we get into today's podcast, I'm going to try to spread the gamut of all possible scenarios. Teenagers, little kids, like big age gaps, all of that. But I will tell you that's impossible to do. Each family has their own dynamics. Heck, I went from 3 girls under 8 years old to 16 to 4-year-old. The dynamics are completely different. The dynamics are different when it's just my girls versus the 7. There's dynamics are different when one kid's out of the house. So it's going to be impossible for me to cover every possible scenario. Please leave a comment below. If there's a question you have that I haven't touched on, drop it in the comments below and I will help you troubleshoot a plan about what to do next. Okay, I am a broken record here, but we always need to keep function in mind, especially when it comes to sibling conflict. What I mean by that is, why are they engaging in this behavior? Attention, escape, access to something tangible, or automatic or sensory. And we're going to get into each of those behaviors. But in order to determine why the sibling conflict is perpetuating, we really need to know the function. Remember, any behavior that's existing or increasing is coming in contact with reinforcement. So they are getting something out of the conflict. Could that be that Lola picks on Parker because every time she does that, I come in and I console her? Could it be that Marley screams at Parker because I'm going to tell Parker to give her the toy because Marley's younger and therefore she gets access? Could it be that Parker really wants Lola's attention, so she nudges her, and if she nudges her enough, Lola will put the computer down and chase her around and they're finally playing? All of those things are really valid. Here's the thing I need you to remember. One behavior can have multiple functions, and one function can have multiple behaviors. So you might have an attention-seeking kid who's like really nudgy and pokey, or who like is constantly asking to play, or who's like really clingy and loud. Those are all different behaviors that are eliciting the same reaction. Let's talk about sibling conflict that results in attention. This is probably one of the more common ones. And the thing is, it's usually about the peer attention. But let's break that down. One of my older kids loves to needle the littler kids. And it starts off fun, like we're just wrestling and we're playing, and then what happens? Well, it's fun until it's no longer fun, and it's no longer fun for the other person, and you're met with a like, well, I was just playing. We're pushing it and pushing it and pushing it because it was a little bit fun to see that little kid get a little bit riled up. Or the attention maintained could be about you. It could be that every time Parker picks on Marley, I come running in. And maybe they like to see me frazzled. Could you imagine? The next function is escape. And this is really common with the like, get out of my room and like throwing things. Or if you have a kid that's constantly asking their sibling to play and their sibling's like, I don't want to. They want to escape that demand or that expectation. Escape maintained behaviors are really difficult sometimes because they can be really easily reinforced. One of our go-to consequences as parents is then go to your room. Phew, I didn't want to play with Timmy anyway. Now I get to be alone in my room. Not that that's not the appropriate answer. It might be, but those are some things we want to keep in mind. The last one is access. So I think about this for like toddlers or littler kids. Like, you took my toy, I want it. Have you ever had a child who never hasn't played with a toy in maybe years, and their sibling picks it up and suddenly it's like, that was my toy. You're not allowed to touch it. Oh, that can be so frustrating. You know what that looks like with older kids? Why are you wearing my sweater? The function of it is access. The reason a lot of sibling conflicts happen around access is because it's easier to grab, to take, to put the sweater on than it is to ask, because a lot of times they say no. Another common sibling dynamic that comes up, and I'm going to overgeneralize and say this often comes up with boys, is the physical struggle snuggle, I call it. Or maybe it's even with dad, and like, it's fun until it's not fun. My dad was like that, right? You're playing and it's fun until like the kid starts to take it too far, and then suddenly it's not fun. But, you know, now dad's losing his mind or whatever that might look like. This is an incredibly difficult thing to navigate with young boys in particular. One of my recommendations is having the boy say, hey, do you want to wrestle, right? I have a younger brother, right? Go up and he like is clotheslining me and is like, let's wrestle. Like, that's not the way to engage in that play. So working on, hey, do you want to wrestle? Hey, can we play that tough? The next part is, as I just described, it can be fun until it's not. So we really need to work on advocating, saying, please stop. I don't like this. I'm done. And the other person respecting that. This is a theme that's going to come up a little bit as we talk about all of these behaviors. I am raising young girls. I am a huge proponent of they need to speak up. If somebody is doing something that you don't like, you need to stand up and say, no, stop that. No, thank you. And I think that that's a really important part. But along with that comes respecting, no, please stop. No, thank you. I need space. And that's where it can get really difficult. One of the problems with this, and often it happens with parents, is that I'm going to use myself as an example. So I used to like tickle my kids, right? And like just being silly. And they would say, please stop. And I would be like, what are you saying? And I would keep tickling. Eesh. In that moment, I am modeling that please stop doesn't elicit me stopping. So how is that any different than when Lola and Parker are wrestling and Parker says stop and she keeps going? I've literally modeled that that's appropriate. So using the tickling example, that's how we work on please stop. I'll tickle them, she'll say stop, and I will stop immediately. And I let them do it to me. So we have practiced using our words to elicit the reaction that we hope for. One of the biggest changes when it comes to sibling dynamics is coming up with some sort of reinforcement system. There's 3 different reinforcement systems in behavior analysis. There's independent, interdependent, and dependent. And I'm going to break down each one of those for you. So an independent earning contingency is where each kid earns on their own. So for example, with just my 3 girls, they each had their own star chart. So they were working on their own things, but everybody was earning, and they were earning individually. The next one is called a dependent. And this is often referred to as like the hero contingency, where the earning for the family is dependent on one. So, for example, I was doing this with a family I work with has 4 children, and getting into the car was extremely difficult. And so what we did was like secret kid. So it was like, ooh, if my secret kid is in the car before the timer goes off, like we all get, I don't know, to choose the song, or I don't know, whatever the right reinforcement is. And this was highly effective because I didn't know who the secret kid is and they're all rushing to get out the door. Now, there's some nuance to this. I would never be like, listen, guys, if Timmy gets out of the pool, then we can all go get ice cream, because what is going to happen? Right? Timmy, get out of the pool. You're losing it for all of us. That sort of thing. That being said, you also need to know the dynamics of your kids. So for example, if I just have my 3 girls and I say, hey guys, if Marley has her shoes on in the next 3 minutes, I know that Lola and Parker are going to be like, Marley, let's help you get your shoes on. So that might work in my home. But you have to be really, really mindful because we do not want to create more contempt or more sibling conflict. So often we use like the secret kiddo. So in that scenario, if I had said to my 3 girls, hey, if the secret kiddo has their shoes on in 2 minutes, they probably would have still helped Marley because like most 4-year-olds, I think her shoes are always on backwards. The last type of group contingency is called the interdependent, meaning all the kids work together as one. So this can look like a variety of things. Last summer in my home, it was a pom-pom jar. So this was when it was still the 3 girls before we completely blended families. We had a pom-pom jar, and this way, all the kids were working together to fill the jar. This creates a little bit of like us versus them, me versus them, and they are working together. And so that means they're more apt to handle that conflict. They're more apt to use some of their strategies because they want to work together. Now, one of the negatives of this is, let's say you have 4 kiddos and 3 of them do really well, but like, man, Timmy's that wild card and you're doing a group contingency. Timmy might still earn, even though his behavior hasn't been exactly where you wanted it. Sometimes that's okay. Just keep that in mind. Currently in our home, and I've described this on a different episode, we have an interdependent system. So in our home, there are 4 boys and 3 girls. And so we have what we call money jars. And so they're dollar bills, and the boys jar and the girls jar, whoever fills the jar first. Actually, we just changed it. We're going to, at the end of each month, we're going to count up the money in the jars, and whoever has the most money gets to determine what we do with that money. Do we go out to ice cream? Do we go to the trampoline park? Whatever that might look like. The idea is that we are using a group contingency to fill the jar. So we are all working together to get more money in the jar. A couple of ways that this is really effective. We have a picky eater. Kids get $1, no questions asked, if they try a new food. So it has led to some encouraging on their part, like, hey, try this food. We can get $1 in our jar, which has been great versus what it used to be is like, ooh, you're not going to eat that. You never eat that. Oh, shocking, right? Do you see how that mockery has changed in its encouragement? So that's just one small example. The way we do any sort of reinforcement system is using intermittent reinforcement. So what intermittent reinforcement means, it's a slot machine example. So I am randomly finding things I want to see more of. So maybe that's being helpful, being kind, whatever that might look like. It is never one-to-one. It's not like every time you're kind to your sister, you get $1, or every time you empty the dishwasher, you get $1. It's looking for things I want to see more of. When you are doing this, you want to consider something called social significance, which is which behavior, if changed, would make the biggest impact in your home. I have been at a point in my parenting journey where my kids each had individual star charts, and they had lots of things written on them, like being independent, being helpful, doing chores. And I took a marker and I crossed them off and I wrote, just be kind to your sibling. Because again, that can be an incredibly consuming behavior. When you're implementing any of these reinforcement systems, we want our kids to earn. This is not a gotcha. This is not a like, in 3 months, we'll see where you're at. We want them to feel it. We want them to earn it. We want them to be motivated by it. So when you're implementing this, be intentional about catching them doing the right thing. The other part of this is there's usually a strong attention component to sibling conflict. Whether that's adult attention or peer attention, sibling attention, doesn't really matter. So what we are doing with the star chart or the money jars or however, pom-pom jars, whatever one you do, is we are being intentional about catching them doing the right thing. We are being intentional about our attention to the right things. So we've talked about this last week on my attention episode. So if you didn't listen, or a couple weeks ago, go back and listen, okay? Because when we are talking about an attention-maintained behavior, sometimes sibling conflict elicits attention 100% of the time. Every time Susie comes crying, mom comes in and she's talking to both kids. So we want to be mindful about catching them doing the right thing as often as possible. And that might mean navigating conflict. This episode is brought to you by OneSkin. I am into taking care of my skin. I started it with the new year. We are 3 months in at using OneSkin products, and I have such a noticeable difference. I cannot believe I waited this long. I have 2 go-to products with OneSkin. One is the daily moisturizer. I use it in the morning. I use it at night. It leaves my skin feeling fresh, clean. It's lightweight. It's an absolute go-to for me. The next product, and I cannot speak highly enough about this, is OneSkin's Under Eye Cream. I'm a redhead. I live in New England. The winter is really tough on my skin, and this has made such a huge difference. I record content daily, and I feel so much better about the bags under my eyes. For a limited time, you can try OneSkin products with 15% off using code BEHAVIOR at oneskin.co/behavior. That's 15% off at oneskin.co/behavior with code BEHAVIOR. After your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please show support for the show and tell them the Behavior Blueprint sent you. In our home, we have a 3-prong approach to sibling conflict. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the episode, but it is really important to me that my kids first say no. Often in sibling dynamics, we get into like a victim and a perpetrator, and that becomes self-fulfilling in some respects. And every time let's use older sibling, younger sibling, because that's usually how it works. So every time Marley is crying, I'm blaming Parker because Marley's 4 and Parker doesn't get it, or whatever that might be. And so then it becomes self-fulfilling. So if I'm trying to reinforce appropriate behavior, and I'm trying to reinforce 1, saying no, 2, walking away, 3, asking an adult for help, I need to reinforce those steps being taken. So if Parker is nudging Marley, and normally Marley's like, stop nudging me, and I run over and I'm like, Parker, stop nudging her. Instead, what I want to do is model, hey, Marley, you can say to Parker, please stop. So instead of running in and rescuing Marley and making assumptions for her, I want to outline what she should do in that moment. Then this is the cool part. So if Marley, I errorlessly model, meaning I tell her exactly what to say. I say, hey, Marley, you can say, please stop. And she says, Parker, please stop. And Parker goes, oh, sure, no problem. There's an opportunity for both of them to be reinforced. So let's say I'm doing the money jar, the pom-pom jar. Oh my gosh, Marley put one in for using your words and Parker put one in for respecting when she said, please stop. That gets us away from the victim perpetrator mentality. A question I often get is like, what happens when you don't see it happen? So let's take that scenario. Let's say I was in a different room and Marley comes running in and she's crying and she says, Parker's poking me and don't like it. Normally, right, we're like, Parker, what happened? Sometimes we tend to believe the 4-year-old because there's a history of behavior there. And we're like, Parker, why were you? Okay, Marley, it seems like you're upset. Let's go back to Parker and say to her, please stop. And we can help facilitate some of that negotiation. One other thing I want to talk about that's been really helpful in our home is something called hype man points. I made this up and it's like one of my favorite strategies. So when we had the independent earning contingencies, the girls each had star charts. We got into a place where it'd be like, Parker's earning, why did she get that? And nails on a chalkboard for me. Like I could not deal. So what would happen is I would be like, hey, Lola, put a star in your chart. And I could see Parker's face and I knew where we were headed. I knew the reaction that was coming next. And I would say, hey, P, Lola did such a great job. Aren't we so proud of her? Wow, she did such a good job cleaning up after herself. And Parker would say, yeah, you did a good job, Lola. And I said, oh my gosh, you need a hype man point. That's amazing. Go put a star on the chart. Everything I do uses intermittent reinforcement, but I will say hype man points are the closest to 1-to-1. Basically, you're going to hype your sister up, you're going to get a star. This is something that's generalized really, really nicely into like, wow, your art looks so good. Or, hey, you did such a nice job with that. Oh my God, go put a star on the chart. Go get a hype man point. We've also used this idea with the money jars. So the kids were all learning to ski this winter. And we have 7 kids. Could be like, oh yeah, you're not even any good at that. You're so slow. And so we're sitting there and one of the older boys says to one of the younger kids, like, man, your turns looked really good out there. And it was like an authentic moment. I'll give him that. I was like, oh my gosh, here's $1. When we get home, we're going to put that $1 in the jar. I love the way you hyped your sibling up. If we can make it more reinforcing to hype them up than it is to tear them down, that will help with a lot of the sibling dynamics. Another example of that, though, is if we weren't putting this in place and the sibling said, like, oh my God, like, you're so slow out there, it's ridiculous. I would have probably jumped in and been like, that's not very nice. Like, why don't you hype up? Why don't you say, hey, nice job? Or if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And they're just like, bro, I was just being honest. He's so slow. Oh my goodness, right? Like, do you see the difference in reinforcing the positive versus getting into this negotiation about how to engage appropriately with that? One thing I want to be super, super articulate about is that I am not anti-consequences. I'm not anti-consequences at all. But what I want to be careful about is the punishment pile on, is like consequence after consequence after consequence. I also want to say I have been there. Like I was there this morning, right? And sometimes you can look at a sibling conflict and there is somebody who is dead wrong. And if you're anything like me, you get sucked in and you're like, why are you doing that to her? Stop doing that. This is ridiculous. You know better. You're 9 years old, which is the stupidest thing to say, but I say it more often than I care to admit. So when that happens, you want to take a step back and be like, okay, gosh, this morning was all sibling conflict. What was at the root of that? And in this example with Lola, it was attention, for example. And so really working with her on, you know what? It seems like you really need my attention in those moments. And you can just say to me, hey, I really need that attention. One thing we want to do is teach them that, though. A lot of times our kids don't even realize that. To be honest, I don't fault them. I didn't realize it until I sat in silence, really analyzing it. So once I got that perspective, I sat down with Lola and I talked to her about it. And I was like, hey, I really need you to tell me, that you need my attention or ask me to sit with you or whatever that might look like. I said, I'm also going to work on my patience. And then beyond that, I'm going to work on naming it for her because she doesn't get it now. Usually this takes several nudgy behaviors before I realize it. But if you're seeing a pattern of behavior, you could say, hey, Lo, really seems like you need some attention right now. You can say, Mom, come sit with me. And we're going to model that for them so they learn how to get that attention. One of the biggest things I want you to keep in mind is role playing and coming back to it and negotiating it. So a lot of times we respond, we separate, whatever that looks like, and we're forgetting to really teach. So have them come back to that scenario. Let's say Lola was on her computer and didn't want Parker around. And so it's like, stop looking over my shoulder. Stop doing that. You're spying on me. I don't like it. Right? And a lot of times I'll be like, you don't talk to her that way. Or Parker scatters off because that was aversive. Now Lola's like, sweet, I yelled at her and I made it really scary and she went away. So a win is a win. I'm going to march Parker's hiney back in there. I'm going to say, let's try this again. If Parker's over your shoulder and you don't like that, you could say, hey, Park, please stop. And hey, Parker, if one, you want to be involved in what your sister's doing, instead of creeping behind her, you could say, hey, could I watch? But if Lola also says, can I have some space? It's okay for you to be like, I really was hoping I could play with you, or can I come play with you in a few minutes, or whatever that looks like, but also respect what your sister's saying. And I'm going to tie all of this into some reinforcement. So it's more reinforcing to engage in the behavior we want to see more of. As kids get older, the sibling conflict becomes less about hey, that's my toy, don't touch my stuff, and more mean comments, sarcasm, needling, all of those sort of things. A really common one in my home, this happens a lot around dessert time, for example, or the kids will go up and shower, they'll come back downstairs, and one kid's sitting at the counter having dessert, and another kid will be like, why does he get ice cream? And what I focus on in that moment is, what do you need? Often as parents, we launch into a lecture and we're like, he got ice cream because he got down here and he ate all of his whatever. You can have ice cream too. I don't care what the answer is. But in that moment, I want to errorlessly model, meaning give the words immediately to, hey, can I have some ice cream? Naming what you need. Because really, it's not about the other person. The function is, in this case, access. I want access to ice cream. And so we want to be really careful about reinforcing the cycle of I come down and I'm like, why is he having ice cream? And Mom jumps in and is like, hey, you can have ice cream too, no worries. Instead, be like, I'm sorry, did you want something? You could tell me what you'd like. You could ask for ice cream. That sort of thing. So just being really mindful about the cycle of needling somebody else and getting the attention or access from the parents. This often comes up too with ooh, must be nice. In fourth grade, they don't have any homework, and putting kids down. Well, you were in fourth grade too once and you didn't have. Again, we get into all of those nuances, and we're trying to explain and rationalize when really what I'm saying is I'm frustrated that I have a lot of homework. So be careful about justifying that and being like, when you were in fourth grade, for the record, I did this exact example yesterday, but instead you can say, hey, it's annoying that you have homework. I get that. Why don't you say, hey, I'm frustrated that I have homework? Sometimes families need a reset. And so if you're interested in implementing any of these group contingencies, which for the record, I highly recommend, I would sit down with your kids and talk about it. A couple of things you want to keep in mind. We want to positively name the behavior for increase. So instead of stop fighting, no yelling, no screaming, using an inside voice, using your words, asking for help, whatever that looks like. What is the behavior you want to see more of? And have your kids be part of that discussion. What are things we need to work on? If you are doing a group contingency where they're all earning together, definitely make them part of the equation. Have them weigh in, have them give their feedback. The more they're involved in the planning process, the better it'll be for getting their input into continuing to buy into the program. As silly as that sounds, naming the behavior for increase, it can make a huge difference. We also need to be mindful of realistic earning criteria. If your kids are wrestling each other 6 times a day, saying to them, if you guys can go 4 days without touching, that's completely unrealistic. When we're implementing any sort of plan, we want it to be low, we want them to earn, and we want to build up from there. Us against them. The last thing that I want to say about this is that progress is not linear. So usually when we implement a star chart or a behavior plan or pom-pom jar or anything like that, we see some change. That doesn't mean that sibling conflict is going to go away. I want you to be really mindful about what you're measuring. Is it less sibling conflict, less mean conversations, longer duration between those things? And there will be times that it will ebb and flow. When you are in one of those rough spots, it usually takes me a couple of days to realize. I would take a step back and be mindful. Have I been paying attention to this chart I put in place? Have I been responding consistently? And what can I change to get us out of this pattern? If sibling conflict is a big point of contention in your home, I want to leave you with this. It is not necessary to solve everything perfectly. Overall, look for patterns. Is something occurring multiple times? What is the function of this behavior and what can I put in place? This is something that happens to me regularly. If we have a rough couple of days, usually on my drive to work, when I'm finally alone with my own thoughts, I'm like, okay, this doesn't feel good. What can I do differently? Make your kids part of that process. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, if you're still listening, thank you, but we can't cover every possible dynamic. So if you have a question, drop it in the comments below. I'm happy to answer anything that you might be dealing with. Also, if you could share this with a parent that has issues with sibling conflict, that would be great. Sending this episode does a lot for me. Somebody said I sound a little desperate when I say this on one of the comments, but that's okay. If you could rate, review, follow, subscribe, that would really mean a lot to me to get this podcast out to more families who could benefit. Remember, we really want to think, what do we want kids to do instead, and how can I teach them that? So thank you so much for coming to this episode of the Behavior Blueprint. I hope that you have some actionable steps to implement with those siblings tomorrow. If this podcast has helped you even a little bit, leaving a review is one of the biggest ways that you can help me. It helps other parents find the show, and honestly, it helps me know what's landing for you. You can do it right now while you're listening. I would really appreciate it. For information on topics like this and many more, come back to this podcast, The Behavior Blueprint Weekly, and you can always check out my content on Instagram and TikTok at The Family Behaviorist. Thanks so much.